Thanks for keeping it tuned in to this edition of the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and joining us to break down what was a crazy few days in the north side and the south side of Chicago. The conversation continues with one of our best friends, one of the best in the industry. You could check out his work over at Cubbies Crib and, of course, over at the mothership at Heartland Signo. He is our friend. He is your friend. He does the work of the gods. He is Rich Eberwein. Rich, welcome back to the show, my brother. Happy post-trade deadline.
All the anxiety is over, but more new anxiety is coming in.
So let's get into that because there was some interesting moves that had led up to what was the Mark Leiter, the last move for the Chicago Cubs, moving forward in this. Would you call it a retooling, a rebuilding, a readjustment? Before we move on to the actual moves themselves and the players that find new homes and what was brought back, what do you think this is called?
It was definitely a retool. A soft sell / retool, I would categorize it, because just the Paredes deal and the Leiter deal are, taking assets and changing them, not really selling and getting future prospects. They got MLB ready talent to just kind of infuse into their roster. So I think it's more of a retool. Whether that I think they should have done a little bit more. I don't like a lot of the deals that they did. I'm kind of just in this limbo spot with the Cubs right now because I'm where do they go from here? Unless they're ready to spend top dollar in free agency, which they should, and I hope they do. I just don't expect that to happen at this point from this front office and from this ownership. So I'm just kind of what do they do from here? You know what I mean?
So I think a lot of that plays into the frustration over the last 2 years, whether it's been under David Ross or under Craig Counsell. And this is not on the managers. It's just the rosters themselves. The frustration of where your team, the record has been, the losing streaks that you've been into, going into the moment now of a trade deadline, and having Cody Bellinger come back and having that home run and giving you that little spark of offense that you're hoping with, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough. And I really want to bring up this, too, because we're going to get into the trades themselves. One of the moves was Christopher Morel, and we talked about it as we did our first therapy session back in the beginning of the season of this experiment. We know Morel has all the goods, but you're asking a young man to go up there and keep his offensive pop, keep that mindset while learning to play third base every single day on a team when we were going into the season was touted as a defensive team, was going to be ranked as a top-tier defense. And none of it ever mixed the right way. None of it ever gelled. It never felt right. So Morel gets traded, and you bring in this 25-year-old third baseman who is an all-star in Paredes, and he has come from the San Diego and now Tampa Bay organizations, two organizations that have had a lot of talent, right, that have developed a lot of talent, that have awesome positional players. But I told you this off mic, one of my worries is always trading with Tampa Bay. They always seem to be the smarter team on the end of every one of their deals. But I feel, and I want to bring up what you said about this article. This is from your latest article over at Cubbies Crib a few days ago. And you said 3 players that the Cubs should not have traded.
Yes.
And number 3 was Christopher Morel. So let's just circle to what you actually say in this at the beginning of the article. There have admittedly been legitimate frustrations with Christopher Morel this year. Yeah. His bat has fallen short of his expectations as he is only slashing to a 1.303 and 379 on the year with an OPS of 682.
Very bad numbers.
Those are not healthy numbers for a guy who figures to have the best raw power on the team. Unfortunately, Morel hasn't been able to put it all together because his defense at third base has also been fairly suspect and has been a significant factor in the team's overall defensive decline. And I think that's not all on him. The team itself has not been a good defensive team, and it's a lot to ask from him.
For
but
sure.
To your point of the entire article, they put him at that position. He wasn't able to put it all together at a fast enough time, and the team didn't have a good enough record to allow him that time to grow. So when they make this move, you're getting a guy, obviously, that doesn't have any of the same power that Morel does.
Yeah.
Somehow has all the home runs, but none of the power.
Okay, yeah. Paredes and Morel are two sides of the same coin, kind of. Both third basemen, both they can hit for power, but it's two opposite sides of the spectrum. If you look at their baseball savant pages, Christopher Morel is one of the guys with the best bat speed and hard hit rate in the league, barrel percentage and things like that. Paredes is the complete opposite. He's on all those sliders on his baseball savant page are blue, so he's at the bottom of those percentiles, but he's still kind of like hit 30 home runs last year, 31 home runs last year. He's on pace for like 25 right now. So it's so weird. They hit for power in like the weirdest ways. Like Paredes is an extreme pull hitter. People have concerns about like how well that's going to translate into Wrigley Field, because Wrigley is weird these days. It's like, okay, yeah, that works in Tampa where down the line it's like 30 feet less than it is in Wrigley Field. So it's like, how well is that going to translate? In the short term, this is an upgrade defensively at third base for sure. And I think that's mostly what was going on here, because the Tampa Bay Rays can plug Christopher Morel into the middle of their infield at second base, which is what they've already done, and can leave him there pretty much. And he's probably going to thrive and turn into an all-star. The Cubs didn't have the flexibility to do that because they've made a financial commitment to Nico Hoerner. And I'm fine with them keeping that commitment and not trading Nico Hoerner, because he is like a cornerstone of this team. He gives you speed, gold glove defense, contact hit. You know, he's like the total package besides power. And he's a leader in your clubhouse now. Like, Christopher Morel was just kind of like this odd man out, and it's unfortunate to see because, to your point, trading with the Rays, like, he's going to thrive in Tampa Bay. And in 2 years, there's a good chance we look back on this trade and we're like, man, the Cubs got fleeced. Paredes did not work out the way we expected. Like, I don't even think he is like this middle of the lineup bat that the Cubs need still. You know, he's kind of a nice complementary piece. When you look at their infield defense now, it's like, I feel more comfortable now with Bush, Hoerner, Swanson, and Paredes. Their lineup is still not that scary, though. And I would have liked to see Christopher Morel get more leeway. But like I said, he just did not jive with their defensive makeup at this time, and it sucks to see him go. Another guy that I didn't want them to trade was Hunter Biggie, because look at the okay, so if that guy and Ty Johnson, who's like the throw-in for this trade, are attractive to the Rays, that means that they are going to take, like, Hunter Biggie's problem is like he's got major big time velocity but control problems. I bet you he's going to turn into like a elite setup man / closer in Tampa Bay. Like, that's exactly what they did. Like, we had Jason Adam, who was like a big time velocity guy. We got rid of him because we're like, he can't keep the ball over the plate. And then he goes and turns into like an all-star setup man in Tampa Bay. Gets traded by the I think the Padres picked him up at this deadline. So I don't know, man. I'm just going to look back. I feel like we're going to look back on this trade and be like, man, I don't know how I feel about this.
So what does it tell you if you're predicting the future? Because they weren't prospect hunting when it came to this specific move, when it came to Morel. We'll get into the lighter trade in a second, but this seems to be much more of we need to address this issue now. We need to have a dependable starting third baseman that's played Major League Baseball.
And I kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum of what I was just complaining about. Like, I do respect the fact that Jed Hoyer kind of shook things up and did something. You know, I think Saurav Sharma had a good point too. It's like, okay, if teams like the Rays are interested in your prospects that aren't even in your top 30, like pitching prospects, like, that's something new. That's something that 10 years ago the Cubs could not have said. So that's kind of a testament to their developing pitching philosophy that they've kind of transitioned to under the Hoyer regime. So that's good. And I do like him, like I said, like, just shaking things up, because clearly something was not right with this team this year. They just could not click. They were never firing on all cylinders. It's like, if their lineup was doing okay, then their bullpen faltered. If their bullpen had a solid 3 innings at the back end, then their lineup didn't score any runs. It's like they just needed some shakeup, something to just like mix it up, like Billy Bean and Moneyball. We're going to shake things up. That's what this trade is kind of to me. Like, and like you said, you're going to get a short-term upgrade defensively at third base with Paredes, and hopefully he just keeps this power going in Wrigley Field. If he keeps hitting 30 home runs a year, I'm fine. That's cool. He's only 25 and he's under team control for 2 more years. So, like, this is a guy who's going to be around for a little bit here. Hopefully it works out. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, clearly.
Well, and quick correction, he was a Tiger, not a Padre. And
he was actually a Cub. Cubs signed him initially.
From Mexico.
He was an international free agent.
So, but it goes to your entire point. All in all, I think this is one of these moves where I commend them for making it. It was a tough move for them to make. We knew they were going to have to make one of these moves eventually. I have always been somebody that if they were going to trade Morel, maybe you should have done it when Pete Alonso was there. But if you're going to keep Cody Bellinger, if you have a feeling that, or if you just had this idea of what you're looking for in the future, then okay, you were going to give him the opportunity and hope for the best because he was going to have some value to him. But either way, I think the Cubs did something that I didn't think they were going to do. They didn't stay put. And to be honest with you, I think they had their cake and they ate it too because a few days later, it's the Mark Leiter deal. So tell me a little bit about how this transpired with the Yankees.
I like this deal. Basically, what you did is you flipped an older, aging reliever in Mark Leiter Jr., who's still good right now, so his value is extremely high. And then you flipped him for a younger reliever who's 24. He's almost pretty much MLB ready right now. He reached the AAA level. His name is Jack Neely. 6'8".
Jeez.
Throws 97 miles an hour with a tight slider. I was just looking at his numbers, glancing at him. He's thrown 160 innings in the minor leagues and struck out 255 batters. So his strikeout numbers are pretty insane. This is a guy who hopefully can turn into a legitimate bullpen weapon for you as soon as next year. And then they also got a utility bat named, I think his name is Ben Cowles. We found out after this trade happened that Jed Hoyer's he also is going to probably miss the rest of the year because he got hit by a pitch on the hand.
Man.
So I was like, okay. Yeah. But I think he's not even the prize. The big catcher is Jack Neely. Cowles is probably going to turn into a, backup infielder type, Miles Mastrobuoni maybe type bat. But Jack Neely, I'm excited about. I think he could actually be a legitimate setup man in the MLB if he continues to pitch well. So he's an exciting get. Like I said, you just flipped an older reliever who's going to be a free agent in 2-3 years or whatever for a younger guy who's under control forever, who throws hard and strikes out a ton of people. So that is a good flip. That's the type of trade that I like to see. It's like you're just turning over your bullpen.
It's one of the things that they've been able to do, right, is finding projects, finding veterans, and getting the best out of them and getting some return from them. This is something that has helped them where, even though it's been a really frustrating season, a lot of Cub fans still have some optimism for the future because of the way they've built things. So this has kind of had me thinking I would think the last 3 weeks, beyond the play on the field and beyond the standings, the talk of some of these players that were on the trade bubble, that were in the trade rumors, and to break it down, the actual results of the trade deadline is our friend from Cubbies Crib, from Heartland Signal, is Rich Eberwein. And Rich, this is the one thing that has kind of really frustrated me this trade deadline season. People bringing up names like Tyone and Justin Steele. While Tyone has had an awesome bounce back and has been a real anchor for this starting rotation, and Justin Steele has all the talent in the world, and the idea that these two pitchers that are under so much contract control, that are so valuable, that for a team that believes they can compete maybe this year a little bit for a wild card, but believe they could put themselves in a position to be a contender next year, I always found it strange the last few weeks that people were pointing at those two names when I think it was always obviously the way that Mark Leiter had been kind of put in that position and that Morel was the odd man out. Cody Bellinger being injured really put a monkey wrench in that situation. The Cubs are too invested in PCA, and they've invested financially on Nico Horner and Dansby. They were only going to make one of two, maybe three moves if you added Kyle Hendricks. What did you think about the rumors of the people a lot of people were spotlighting? And now that it's all kind of come and gone and we've broken down all these trades, what are your final thoughts of the Cubs 2024 trade deadline and what they got back, what they traded, and kind of the vibes now heading into the end of the season?
So, first of all, I think trading Justin Steele would have been a complete mistake. that you're not trading your ace. Typically, is not a good idea.
Usually,
he's under team control for I think 2 or 3 more seasons. Like that one, I would not have enjoyed. I would have been yelling a lot more on here. Tyone is a guy I wish they kind of did trade. And here's why. It's like, so this was a seller's market for sure. There was a lot of teams who needed starting pitching. Tyone's stock is extremely high right now. His ERA before that 6-run game in Cincinnati a couple days ago was below 3. You could have gotten, I think, a decent amount, like a couple or 3 decent prospects for Tyone. And here's the thing. It's like, all right, so it probably would have been hard because he's got all this team control, money commitments, $18 million every year for the next few years. But there was a lot of teams that needed starting pitching, and here's the thing: it's like, yeah, you would like Tyone to stay with the Cubs because they're trying to compete next year. He gives you length. He's gone deep into a lot of games. If you're going into the postseason, I don't think there's really like you're kind of confident with Tyone because he's stacked up so many years of pitching. He's what's the word I'm looking for? He's
consistent.
He's built up.
Yeah.
He can pitch into October if you need him to.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys who can do that on the Cubs roster right now. It's like you have a lot of starting depth, but it's like Javier Assad hurt, a lot this year. Ben Brown hurt a lot this year. Jordan Wicks hurt a lot this year. These are all guys who are going to be in your rotation in the next few years, but are not built up.
We've never seen Shota in October.
Hey, Shota is another guy. It's like, okay, so you got a lot of depth there, but there's not a lot of guys who you can rely on where if you get to October, you're like, I'm not worried about this guy burning out. Mm-hmm. Tyone would be one of those guys where you're not really worried about that, along with Justin Steele. Here's the thing, though. It's like I said, like you could have sold him for a lot. There's a seller's market. A lot of teams needed starting pitching. And then you could have reinvested that money into the starting pitching market in the offseason while still getting prospects. So I would have made sense. I'm not in the front office. I don't know what – there was a lot of rumors around Tyone, a lot of teams that seemed to be in on him, but I don't know what the deals were. I don't know what the offers were. So maybe Jed Hoyer was like, I value Tyone more than what you're giving me. So the deals didn't happen, but that was a guy who made sense to me where it's like you have such a deep starting pitching market in this coming off season where you could have reinvested the money. But maybe they just like Tyone. I don't know. He seems like a good clubhouse guy, too. He's come around on the mound. Like from the first half of last year was ugly. You're like, oh, my God, we got this guy for 4 more years. But now you're kind of looking at him like this guy is a solid starting pitcher for the Chicago Cubs. If you're in postseason, I'm like, I want him on the mound.
Yeah, it's not a bad guy to have as your third if everything's working out the way it's supposed to have somebody be that solid of a fixture on your foundation. But, I mean, I still feel like this was an interesting trade deadline because the frustration is some of the moves, but it's just the entire season has just been frustrating.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like there's so much like angst around the fan base right now because it's like, oh, my God, like ticket prices are still high. I'm still paying $14 for a Bud Light every time. And this team is, we're supposed to be competing this year, and it's just like it is a frustrating vibe. It's like, first year of Craig Counsell, like the offense just looks broken. There's just like a lot going on. It's like, how are we going to fix all this? What's going to happen? Another move I would have liked them to make is shipping off Mike Tauchman. Just for, he's a veteran bat, 33 years old. He's not part of the future. He's, at 25, 26, so you're going to be sitting there looking at like, I wish they would have shipped him off just to like get rid of some of the outfield clutter that they're going to have. Like, they got all these guys on the 40-man roster who you haven't even seen yet, like Brennan Davis and Kevin Alcantara. Canario comes up and down. He's like the guy who's, when somebody gets hurt, comes up and down, but those are guys you'd like to see stay up here, at some point. So yeah, Mike Tauchman would have made sense to me. Maybe Patrick Wisdom too.
Interesting. So were you? And this, I'll leave you with 2 final ones. First one, do you think they should have been more sellers or more buyers?
More sellerish, I think. Just see what you can get for those guys. Maybe there wasn't any value for those guys. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the offers were. I don't know if Hoyer even put those guys on the market. But that I would have liked to seen some of the clutter on the 40-man come off.
Sure.
Just to free things up for free agency, and because they need to make some additions here.
So let's get into the final thing. Did you learn anything about what maybe their plans are for the offseason?
Not a thing. All I know is they need to find a catcher in the offseason. They need to either trade for the starting or the catching market in the free agency is not that pretty from what I was looking at like a month or two ago. So I would assume they're probably going to trade for catchers at some point. Because Miguel Amaya looks pretty ugly out there sometimes.
Yeah.
His arm is not it. You need a starting catcher. Like Amaya can be your backup, I think, but you need a starting catcher. I would like to see them sign another starting pitcher, possibly. What you really, really need is a closer.
Sure.
That's the one where you. And maybe a closer and then like a left-handed reliever. If you sign those, then you're looking at your bullpen and you're like, this is not bad. And you can work with this. And you need big bats, but where are you going to put them is my question, Like, say you go out and sign Juan Soto, God willing.
That'd be amazing. Please. Answer the prayers.
If you sign Juan Soto, I guess you'd just throw him in right field and put Suzuki at DH or
figure that part out later.
Yeah. There's not a lot of room. My point is, there's not a lot of room for the bats.
It makes me think they're going to be aggressive this offseason one way or the other because they have to at some point start making decisions on players.
Right. And you need to fix your offense. Brady's, like I said, great complimentary piece, but you have a lot of great complimentary pieces.
Yeah.
You need a big dog in the lineup.
And Cody Bellinger was supposed to be that. You could go back in the archives. One of our biggest worries was the regression. We saw the awesome season and the injury happened, but if you have that big dog, the king of your lineup there, it changes everything, just like having an ace and then having a fixture like Tyone and Steele and Imanaga in your starting rotation.
Takes the pressure off everybody else around you.
100%. It allows people to do things.
Yeah.
It allows Ian Happ to be able to be a free at-bats out there and free-flowing and having PCA out there stealing bases. And who knows morale would have been had this team taking care of business the way they were supposed to and how many times they've blown saves. To your point, all this goes back to bad play on the field and bad roster construction heading into the season. And that is why this is going to be the story post-trade deadline and heading into the winter meetings, the GM meetings, and before pitchers or catchers reports in February. But, Rich, any final thoughts, brother? I mean, this is our August therapy session that coincides with the trade deadline. Any final thoughts on what we saw from the Northsiders?
I mean, like I said, there was a little bit that I liked, a little bit that I didn't like. It left me feeling like I wanted more. But this year is kind of over, for the Cubs. Like they've kind of thrown in the towel, I think. But I'm gonna watch and just for Paredes, I'm gonna keep watching, see how he does down the stretch here. But yeah, I want more in the offseason. I want them to spend more money. So hopefully that happens. I want them to sign a big bat this offseason. Those are my final thoughts.
Check out all his awesome work and all the awesome work done at Cubbies Crib. His latest article was the 3 Cub players that they shouldn't trade, and now we have to see where Rich's bounce back is because it's a new look Cubs. It's a different vibes. But there's going to be a lot of shakeup, and I think we're going to see an interesting offseason, especially since they missed the playoffs, and both the Cardinals and the Brewers are more likely than not going to end up in the playoffs. So it's going to be a very frustrating last few weeks. Rich, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Check out all his work at Cubbies Crib and at Heartland Signo. He is Rich Eberwein. He joined us today on the Sports Cubicle as we broke down the Chicago Cubs trade deadline. We have a whole lot left. We are breaking down what the White Sox did. They had a lot of movement. There's a whole lot of feeling about what happened in the South Side as well. So Paulie and Dev will be breaking that down. And of course, we had ourselves a Hall of Fame game. The Chicago Bears football is back. Oh, thank the Sports Gods, football is back. DJ Moore has a contract. It's a jam-packed edition of the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM Heartland Signal. I'm your host, Mike Mercado.